Life is Strange 2 is one of the most raw and unfiltered experiences I've had in gaming. It easily eclipses the original game in my eyes as it explores more bold and poignant themes, keeping what worked from the first game and downplaying many of the things that didn't. But in order to talk about why I love Life is Strange 2, and perhaps more importantly for some, why I liked it more than Life is Strange 1, we need to briefly go over my general thoughts on that game for context, as it will help demonstrate why I feel the sequel was such a big improvement. Because for a lot of people, mostly hardcore fans of the original, Life is Strange 2 was something of a disappointment, as it did not contain many of the things that first attracted them to the franchise. And I'm not going to tell anyone they're wrong for not liking Life is Strange 2, but I am going to get into why I personally feel like this notion is misguided. Also, quick disclosure, I've never played Before the Storm. Frankly, I don't really plan to. In my eyes, it's an unnecessary prequel made by a different developer that doesn't even use the same voice cast. Nothing about it entices me, and I don't feel like my Life is Strange experience is any less complete for missing out on it, just throwing that out there. Also, I just found out as I was doing prep work for this video that there's apparently a new comic series that takes place after one specific ending of the first game, which, I've not read that either. I guess it's cool for people who want to see that, but personally I don't see a ton of story potential there, so I'm not too interested. Maybe I'll check it out sometime if I hear good things, but it seems kinda superfluous to me. But aside from that, spoiler alert for both mainline games. I'm gonna try not to give away too much if you haven't played these games yet, but I need to cover some fairly major points to give context and make my arguments. Life is Strange is about a college freshman named Max returning to her old hometown to attend a prestigious art school after moving away as a child. Upon witnessing her childhood friend Chloe get unceremoniously murdered, she awakens to her bizarre ability to rewind time. Undoing her friend's death, the two reunite just in time to investigate the disappearance of a former Blackwell Academy student and encounter all of the charming residents of Arcadia Bay using Max's newfound power to try and piece together what's going on. That's the basic premise that kicks things off, and players are treated to an engaging narrative full of twists and turns, tragic backstories, hidden secrets, and some clever usage of Max's rewinding to discover new clues, resolve teenage melodrama, and sometimes just goof around for the hell of it. The game grew in popularity during its episodic release, despite many outlets bashing it for its awkward, slang-filled dialogue, incessant melancholic narration, and brazen hipster attitude. But for fans of the series, it all added to the charm. It was a humorous pastiche of adolescence, not for what it is in reality, but for what it might look like from the outside looking in. It wasn't everyone's cup of tea, and even I have to admit I find some lines cringeworthy, but nothing tore me away from the earnestness of the game's writing. This was a story someone out there was passionate about telling, and they would tell it their way, haters be damned. I liked that. I still like that. We need more of that. But one thing the game has become famous for, and it's difficult to even avoid discussing it if one wishes to discuss the series in general, was the player's ability, if they so chose, to engage in a romantic relationship with the game's co-star Chloe. This was considered somewhat revolutionary at the time. Even Dontnod themselves admitted to going through several potential publishers before they found one that embraced the idea of a lesbian relationship taking the forefront.
Well, actually, both Max and Chloe are pretty clearly bi, but let's not get into that can of worms.
It's important to remember, however, that this development, while extensively fleshed out, is also entirely optional. The player can have Max slowly grow a fondness for her male classmate Warren, or remain entirely celibate and focused on the central mystery if they so choose. I myself have never done a playthrough of the game romancing Chloe, which seems to be a bit of a rare perspective to have on the game. I have a lot of reasons for not wanting to romance Chloe, and none of them are because I'm secretly a raging homophobe. If I was, I probably wouldn't be talking about this series at all. I'd probably be out starring in Bud Light commercials or going to this church specifically. Speaking of Chloe, Chloe is one of the most perplexing characters I've ever encountered in fiction that I still, years after playing the entire game through twice, still don't know what to make of her. Because on the one hand, I find her to be a superbly realized character in terms of how realistically they portray this rebellious, cynical, bitter girl who lost her father and has to deal with this new hard-ass mall cop calling himself her father.
What's going on in here? Why is she here?
None of your business.
I don't like strangers here.
But with this realism comes a lot of difficult flaws to swallow. The kinds of flaws that make her a more complete character are the same flaws that make Chloe difficult to like or even to be around. She is, at the best of times, needlessly combative, prone to catty jealousy, and will often do incredibly dickish things just because it amused her. None of these things would be so conflicting to me as a player if not for the game's insistence upon Chloe. There are many instances where the game will outright guilt-trip you into supporting Chloe's self-destructive and occasionally illegal whims. But it is ambiguous whether this is a sort of meta-commentary, putting the player into Max's shoes in terms of experiencing a toxic friendship, or rather clumsy writing that pushes you into enabling Chloe's worst aspects to spite yourself. Now, I know you clicked on a review of the second game, but I need to go through all of this to explain why I think the sequel is a vast improvement, specifically in regards to how Life is Strange 2 handles the dynamic between its own central duo. Throughout the video, I'm going to be jumping back and forth between the games to address several different points. Life is Strange 2 begins with our new protagonist, Sean Diaz, high schooler and son of a Mexican immigrant, getting off the bus and walking home with his best friend Lila as they discuss various teenagery things. An upcoming party, a girl he wants to talk to, booze, weed, all that good teenagery stuff. The beginning portion of the game introduces us to Sean's life. He lives in a small yet cozy home in Seattle with his father and younger brother Daniel. He has a best friend and a phone full of contacts from school. He's on the track team. He has a passion for drawing, which the player can indulge him in throughout the entire game.
My room almost looks cool on this. Not an easy task. Good job.
You prepare for the upcoming party, choosing what snacks to bring, asking your father for alcohol money.
You need money for the party tonight, right? Shh. Just be honest with me. No bullshit. Are you using this money to buy alcohol? Weed?
Trying to figure out how to break the ice with Jen. There's little rush though, the game gives you plenty of time to examine Sean's room, check his phone messages, observe each and everything in the house with expositional glee. Sean has a pretty good life. His mother may be long out of the picture, and perhaps he has some unresolved feelings regarding that, but his father Estevez works hard for his boys. Estevez is playful, understanding, and seems to be managing this whole single-parent thing rather well, all things considered. Daniel might be a pain in Sean's ass sometimes, but the kid's only 9 years old. What is there to do? And sure, his neighbor might be a dick.
Hey, lovebirds. Back from the loony bin?
Shut the fuck up, dickhead.
But surely nothing will ever come from that, right? I'm going to do something a little different and play this next scene out in its entirety. Nothing I could write in words could hope to match the impact of seeing the igniting incident of the story firsthand.
Hold on, okay? Something's going on outside.
What do you mean? Hey,
Look at my shirt, asshole!
What's the big deal? It's Halloween.
Don't ever touch my brother. You hear me, Brett?
Fuck you, Diaz. He got his fake blood shit all over my shirt. Look!
I told you, it was an accident. You better leave us alone.
Oh yeah, go hide in your dad's garage. Pussies. You think you own the block?
Dude, step back. He didn't mean it. He's a fucking kid.
He's a fucking retard.
What did you just say?
You heard me, bitch.
Don't ever touch him again.
Or what? You gonna get your daddy?
Hey, asshole. I don't need him to protect me from you.
Oh, you wanna go?
Oh yeah, motherfucker?
Then go back to your own country.
Whoa! Sean, you hit him.
Get inside now.
Sean!
You're dead meat, bitch. You and your whole fucking family are going to jail, losers.
What's going
Fuck
on?
me. Daniel, get over here.
Sean, is he hurt?
Okay. Okay, step away. Now.
Calm down, officer.
Shut up! And step back. On the ground. Now.
Hey, wait. This guy was
He started
beating up
it.
my
On
little
the
brother.
ground. Now. Hands behind your head.
Sean!
This is fucking bullshit.
Oh no.
Sean, what's
Get on the
happening?
ground, sir.
Dad, we didn't do
Sean,
anything.
be quiet.
I swear.
Officer,
Dad!
listen.
I'm sorry, Dad.
Daddy!
Be quiet.
I want to go home.
They're good kids, officer.
Don't move.
I'm sure they didn't do
I
anything.
said don't move.
Stop this!
Didn't
Daniel,
do anything.
it's gonna be all right.
On the ground.
Daniel! Hey! Come on! Daniel, come on! We gotta go! Now!
And that's it. One single tragic miscommunication later, and Sean and Daniel's lives have been irrevocably changed forever. There's no going back now. Unlike with Max, there's no turning back time. Sean and Daniel are on the run from the law for a crime they can hardly be at fault for. An officer is dead on the ground because of the mysterious power Daniel has just awakened to. Whereas the first game presented Max's power as a way to solve problems before ultimately demonstrating in many various ways why things were never going to be that simple, Daniel's power is the literal source of all of their problems. And this is where we get into the divide between fans concerning this game. Life is Strange 2, in no simple terms, is very different from the original, in most every way, and deliberately so. Whereas the original took place in one central location, that being the town of Arcadia Bay, Life is Strange 2 is a road trip adventure. Sean wants to flee the country and reach his father's hometown of Puerto Lobos down in Mexico, where they'll be safe from the clutches of a system that, even if the brothers could explain what happened, would never hear them out. This setup immediately creates a sense of uncertainty. In the original game, up until near the end, Max could always give up and return to her safe, warm dorm room at any point. She wouldn't, obviously, but the fact remains that it was always an option for Max. Sean and Daniel are not so lucky. They're homeless fugitives. They have to survive off of extremely limited funds and the generosity of strangers. Whatever you took in preparation for the party that you'll never get to attend is all you have at the start of the game. It doesn't matter in the long run, but every little thing you do in this game provokes some kind of consequence. Sean's struggles feel so much more palpable than Max's because he doesn't get an undo button. He doesn't get to catch a break, even in the short term. I'm not trying to argue Max didn't go through painful events. Of course she did, but my point is that, again, up until near the end, there was never anything stopping her from just giving up. Obviously, these are two very different stories structurally, but the fact that Sean can't escape his situation and has to live with the ramifications of every single uninformed choice or momentary lapse in judgment makes his struggle so much more real. This affects how the player interacts with the game. In the original, you could more often than not manipulate a scene however you pleased until you were content with your actions, but in Life is Strange 2, everything has more weight. You put more consideration into what you do because you can't take it back.
Unless you reload the chapter, but come on, man, don't be that guy.
Daniel is the heart and soul of Life is Strange 2. If Daniel didn't work, the game wouldn't work. Most of the game is the Diaz brothers going through various locations, meeting people who won't appear again after their focal episode, so the dynamic between these leads needed to be strong. If Daniel had turned out to be as much of a base breaker as Chloe was, there would be a major problem. Fortunately, from what I've seen, that didn't end up happening, at least not with people who didn't write off the game from the outset, at any rate. Part of that is due to Daniel being better contextualized, but the other part comes from Daniel just being better written. Daniel is a child. A degree of irrationality and skewed priorities is to be expected. You know, humorously, I'd like to think that perhaps the developers saw people complain that Chloe at times acted like a petulant child, so they decided to make the next protagonist a literal child out of spite. That's probably not how it went down, but the thought amuses me greatly. In this game, Daniel is the one with the special power, not the player character Sean, which is another drastic difference from the first game. You're not the special one. You're the guy who has to babysit the special one. Most decisions you make throughout the game have major influence on Daniel's behavior and outlook. There are two things your decisions affect: Daniel's loyalty and Daniel's morality, and these are far from mutually exclusive. Oftentimes, lawful or righteous decisions will draw Daniel's ire, while many methods of keeping Daniel happy will imbue him with a disregard for society's rules. Some decisions raise both loyalty and morality, while others lower them both in equal measure. The game's way of tracking this is extremely subtle and never quite spelled out to the player. As you go through this journey, Sean, and by extension the player, are essentially raising Daniel into the person he will eventually become. What's more important, keeping Daniel safe or keeping Daniel happy? Do you work within the system as best you can, or do you decide that the system that abandoned you can go to hell, you'll do whatever it takes to survive? Daniel's loyalty really only affects what he says and whether he'll listen to Sean in some small ways, but Daniel's morality, in addition to the player's final choice, is ultimately what determines the ending. One of the biggest criticisms of the first game is that ultimately the final decision was all that mattered. Max's time-rewinding shenanigans have caused a massive storm of inevitability that will destroy the town and everything she loves in it, and the message becomes clear: no matter how much you might want to, you can't take back the past. All of Max's attempts to fix what she saw as broken always led to equally awful outcomes, and so the decision has to be made. Sacrifice the town, or go back to the very beginning and let Chloe die in that bathroom like she was always meant to. The game offers you the choice to save Chloe, but at tremendous cost. Nearly everyone in that town, your town, will die if you go against destiny. A big complaint was that the ending where you choose to let Chloe die was longer and more fleshed out than the alternative. This is simply my conjecture, but I think, in opposition to large swaths of the fandom, that this was always meant to be the true ending, with sacrificing the town meant as a bad ending simply not labeled as such. Letting Chloe die completes the thematic arc of the game. Everything is undone, but as Chloe says, all of it still mattered. Max's ability to rewind time was always meant as a symbol of her inability to accept her friend's death, to accept that bad things happen, and you can't always be there to prevent every tragedy. If Max had never left Arcadia Bay, maybe Chloe could have turned out differently. But you can't turn back time, and Max was only granted the ability to do so that she could learn to accept her regrets and move on. And all the knowledge she gained on her adventure put a stop to a dangerous murderer and revealed a local conspiracy. Rachel, Chloe, and all the other students who died can rest in peace. It is the good ending, though bittersweet. But of course that didn't stop people from complaining, because for a large portion of the fandom the fact that you could be a lesbian was all that mattered to them, and they felt they were being punished for wanting a happy ending for their power couple, which just completely ignores everything else the game was going for. For those who only hopped on board the Life is Strange train for the lesbians, Life is Strange 2 was seen as a massive disappointment, because apparently exploring discrimination against Hispanics, the homeless, and the disenfranchised just isn't woke enough. And since we're on that topic, let's dive into that. Life is Strange 2 has many things to say about the current state of America, and for what it's worth, it says them very well. It isn't just screaming at you that racism is, yes, very bad, and you shouldn't do it, although it does give off that implication. In fact, Sean only encounters a handful of bigots during his journey. His encounters with them brief, but certainly memorable.
You ain't the first beaner we caught. You speak Spanish, Pedro?
Huh? What?
What? Hablas español.
Chad.
So, Professor, how do you say, I'm a dirty thief?
Soy un sucio ladrón.
Soy un sucio ladrón. Nice. Sounds better when you say it. This is fun. Now say, I'm a dirty thief with one eye. All I want to do is learn Espanol. Might be our official language someday, right? Si, senor? So, one more lesson. How do you say, this is not my country?
The big bad orange man is never mentioned by name, but his influence in the game's setting, our world, can be felt if only you turn the wrong corner.
Maybe I should call ICE to make sure you're a citizen.
Fuck you, hillbilly. I'm American.
Watch it, punk.
Whatever. You're going to jail for this.
Pretty sure the local police will vouch for me over a thug like you.
Where's my brother?
Wish I knew. Little shit took off. I'll find him. Don't worry.
If you touch him...
You think I'd hurt a little boy? Guess you didn't have any second thoughts about leading him out into the middle of nowhere, though. That's real safe for a little kid. If he's lucky, he won't end up like his criminal big brother.
Just let me go. Please.
You're the reason we need to build that wall. You hold tight. I'm gonna go get your brother.
Here's the thing, you could not do this run for the border plotline without addressing this unless you wanted your game to come across as incredibly tone-deaf and borderline negligent. And I don't give a single fuck if you think this dialogue is too on the nose. I don't care if you think it sounds stupid and cringy, because I've got news for you. Racism is stupid and cringy. If it sounds wrong to you, that's because it is. In my view, this is not an exaggeration of reality. It's done with nuance. Most of the people Sean and Daniel meet on their journey are genuinely kind people, but all it takes is a few bigots to paint an ugly picture. I'm not Hispanic myself, but I went to school with many of them. I've seen these types of encounters. I've been to fucking Facebook. I've seen the face of hate, and it looks an awful lot like this. If you don't like seeing it, maybe you should stop making excuses for it. Stop telling developers that it doesn't belong in their game. For some people, these scenes hit very close to home. And that's why Life is Strange 2 is so important. It validates their feelings. It isn't right. Things shouldn't be this way, but they are. And it's important that these kinds of stories be told. And on the other side of the coin, you have people acting like none of this is as important as having lesbians as the face of your game. And to those people I say, grow the fuck up. This is not a contest of which group is the most oppressed or most underrepresented. It's all important. There's enough video games in the world to cover everyone's issues. Not everything has to be about your personal hang-ups exclusively. And even then, Life is Strange 2 has you covered. Sean is revealed to be bisexual in episode 3, and he can share an intimate moment with either Finn or Cassidy depending on whoever the player thinks suits him best. It's heavily implied Penny is out on the streets because he's gay. Hell, it's outright confirmed with Jacob, whose own church tried to have him sent to conversion camp. Just because LGBT issues aren't front and center here doesn't mean they've forgotten them entirely. This series has always struck a really nice balance between exploring these sorts of issues and themes without being too overbearing or preachy. Let's not act like ungrateful fucks because our special interest of choice isn't getting top billing. Sorry, I just had to get that off my chest. Fuck, this video is so disjointed, but I just have so many things I want to touch on. Anyway, Daniel is a major improvement over Chloe as a protagonist for a number of reasons. Number 1, his behavior is influenced directly by the player's actions instead of dictating the player's actions. If Daniel acts flippant or disrespectful, it's at least partially your own fault. Number 2, his status as a child who just awakened to a mysterious telekinesis power while trying to adjust to a life on the run provides a better justification for his moments of angst and irrationality compared to Chloe, who was not only a grown woman, but whose father had passed away years prior. Daniel also isn't as selfish, and more often than not is a sweet kid when treated right. Number 3, Daniel is very well written for a child character. He doesn't always get the reasons for things right away, but if you're patient with him, he will learn to understand. He acts out when upset, but it's always understandable. He's frequently put in the kinds of situations that even adults would have trouble dealing with, and he handles them better than I think most 9-year-olds in real life would ever be expected to. And number 4, whereas Max and Chloe's dynamic was perhaps more toxic than that game acknowledged, Sean and Daniel's Brotherhood is absolutely nailed. I myself have a younger brother that is coincidentally also 6 years younger than me, just like the Diaz's. While my life has gone a lot smoother than Sean's, this game definitely succeeded at putting me back in that place in the summer of 2010, where I'd often have to babysit and take care of my own brother, and I cannot stress enough how absolutely perfect their relationship is. Daniel could be a brat at times. He'd annoy Sean when he was trying to hang out with his friends, he'd go into his room and take things without asking, he'd tattle on him to their father, etc. But at the end of the day, they were still friends, they were still brothers. They went on family outings, they played copyright-friendly Xbox together, they'd get each other little gifts and talk about their day. Their bond is essential to the emotional core of this story. And I think my only complaint about Daniel's character is that unlike Max, his power, telekinesis, doesn't really tie into any central theme that I can see. I don't know, if anyone has a good idea of what telekinesis is supposed to represent in this story, I'd love to hear it, but to me, it just seems like he has a superpower because that's what Life is Strange is. It's an anthology series about ordinary people with only this one supernatural element thrown into the mix. It's just like life, but you know, stranger. And if you want my overall thoughts on Life is Strange 2, I would tell you that I think it has a stronger written central duo, a more thought-provoking and thematically realized narrative, and manages to tone down or outright remove the first game's worst elements. There's still a little slang here and there, but it's few and far between comparatively, and most of it comes from Daniel, who's expected to say some dumb things from time to time, as a Minecraft-obsessed kid would. The game also tones down the melodrama to an appropriate level for the given story. Nothing feels too overblown or sappy here. A proper balance of indie film spirit and mature storytelling has been achieved. It still has the coffee shop music, it still has the emotional montages, the main character still waxes poetic about every observable thing in sight, but it's clear now that this is the style and charm of the series. The mood and aesthetic is still present from the first game, it's just matured. Despite the spoiler warning, I actually don't want to give away too much of the plot of either game. I think they're both quality narrative experiences anyone who enjoys these types of games should take a look at. There's a whole lot more to see beyond what I've spoiled you on. This wasn't meant to be a full breakdown and analysis of everything in the game, I only wanted to give some of the reasons why I prefer it over the original, and gush about some things I think it did really well. But I'm not quite done yet. So far, I don't think I've spoiled too much of Life is Strange 2, but there's one last point I want to talk about that I need to discuss the game's various endings to do. If you're interested in playing these games and don't want to know the various ways Life is Strange 2 can end, I would recommend stopping the video here and coming back after you've beaten the game. If you already know or don't care about getting spoiled, stick around. 3, 2, 1... Life is Strange 2 has 4 endings, with a few minor variations depending on your decisions throughout the game. They are Lone Wolf, Blood Brothers, Parting Ways, and Redemption. Parting Ways has 3 distinct variations depending on whether you chose to romance Finn, Cassidy, or nobody. And Redemption has 1 alternate variation depending on whether you contacted Lila both times you could. So in total, there are 7 outcomes to the game. I don't think it's inaccurate to say that this game doesn't have a cut-and-dry good ending. Every single conclusion has pros and cons, and fans still debate to this day what the best one might be. In my opinion, it depends a lot on your worldview and what you think the story ought to have been about. In Lone Wolf, Sean chooses to surrender himself at the border, but because Daniel's morality level is so low, he locks Sean inside the car and tries to blast his way through the armed forces regardless. This recklessness results in Sean's tragic death, and Daniel is now trapped in a foreign country where nobody speaks his language, all by himself. Most people consider this the bad ending of the game, as it basically has no positive aspects over the other endings, and results in what is almost inarguably the darkest outcome. In Parting Ways, Sean chooses to force his way through the border, but Daniel's morality level is too high to accept that decision, so he turns himself in, and Sean crosses over without him. Daniel is pardoned as a minor and raised by his grandparents back in Oregon, where he lives a restrained life as evidenced by his ankle monitor, but he does get to have a reasonably normal childhood. He gets to be with loving grandparents, who get to make amends with their estranged daughter, and Daniel gets to be best friends with Chris, just like he wanted. But the brothers are forever separated. Sean can never return to the US, and Daniel likely won't be allowed to see him anytime soon. Sean, for his part, seems happy in Mexico, living either by himself or with Finn or Cassidy. It's an interesting outcome that implies each brother got to live the way they were comfortable with, which unfortunately meant they couldn't live together. Redemption is sometimes seen as the best ending by a lot of players. Sean and Daniel both turn themselves in at the border, and end up separated as Sean is sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. The game cuts to his release, where Daniel, their mother, and potentially Lila are waiting for him. But Sean is different now. His time inside has changed him. While he's happy to see his loved ones again, he's lost so much time, all for a crime he didn't commit. I really want to argue against the sentiment that this is the best ending. When Sean and Daniel return to the woods they camped in years before, Sean breaks down and cries, realizing just how much of Daniel's life he's missed. Sean is 31 now, the prime of his life stolen from him. He doesn't even stay with Daniel, instead going off to travel the world, according to the writer's Twitter. 15 years for a crime he didn't commit. Does anyone who argues that this is the best ending know what it must have been like for Sean in prison? As a Hispanic? As a purported cop killer? 15 years of suffering and isolation for something that was never his fault, for only doing what he needed to do to protect himself and his brother. The ending may be called redemption, but redemption in the eyes of whom? In the eyes of a system that abandoned them? A system that wouldn't listen to them? That would never give them a fair chance? Redemption in the white man's world? No. But there is one more ending, and I'd like to make my own personal case for it. And I want to stress that this is all my own opinion that reflects my own views. The fact this game has inspired these kinds of debates is in itself a mark of quality. It takes courage and maturity to not give a clear-cut happy ending, to show that the world is complicated, and nothing ever goes just how you want it to. I think all of the endings make sense for the kind of person the player can mold Sean to be. But Blood Brothers is the ending I got, and I think it fits the best. Sean and Daniel both agree to run the border. They escape together into Mexico, leaving everything they know in the States behind. The post-time skip scene implies they've taken on something of a life of crime to get by, using Daniel's powers to screw over local criminals. That said, things aren't as grim as it seems. For one, they leave the gang members alive, showing that there are lines they still don't want to cross if they don't have to. Additionally, Sean has taken up his father's profession as a mechanic, opening his own shop, which shows that they are trying, as hard as it might be, to make a life for themselves legitimately. Some people say escaping to Puerto Lobos, their father's hometown, was a childish pipe dream, but this ending shows that they made it work for them. They took their freedom, even if they had to sacrifice their lives in America to achieve it. They refused to bow down before an unfair system. They were warned how dangerous Mexico could be. There is a reason so many people choose to come to America, after all. But it was better than paying the price for something they weren't guilty of, and despite everything, they seem happy to be together, no matter how difficult things get for them. For me, this ending best represents the themes of the game. This is what it can be like for people of color in America. There's no fair and just ending for them. Every other ending demands they make sacrifices they shouldn't have to just to be allowed the privilege to stay in a country that actively mistreats them. Those aren't endings that the Sean I played would have accepted. I mean, sure, in the redemption ending he says this,
We're not criminals.
but my dude, they never cared. Criminal is just a label. One they applied to you long before you ever did anything worthy of it. You can enjoy your self-validation all you want in prison, they're not gonna care. If you ask me, this mindset of not becoming what they make you out to be is a far more childish notion than escaping to Puerto Lobos ever was. All his life, Sean worked his ass off to be the best person he could be, the kind of person his father wanted him to be, and it still wasn't good enough. So when he finally reached the border, when freedom was finally in sight, I think he would have seized it. And I have to give the game credit that it doesn't particularly judge the player, no matter which ending they receive. Each ending is perfectly tailored to the kind of person the player made Sean out to be, and the game just lets the events play out and lets the player determine if it was worth it for themselves. And in my opinion, Blood Brothers is the most satisfying thematically, even if it isn't perfect. Sean and Daniel made the best out of the shitty hand they were dealt, and they did it together. To me, that is Brotherhood. And more than anything else, that is what Life is Strange 2 was always about. Zeke freak out. Ciao ciao for now.
And we could just fade away into each other's lives. And we could just fade away until we're all right. And we could just fade away into each other's lives. And we could just fade away until we're all right. Just like a bird, I would like to fly away, yo. Off of this earth, I would fly with the halos. Don't know my worth, but I figured out how pain goes. Treat it as a curse or reverse it, okay, go back to a time when I didn't make choices. Back to a time when my parents were my voices. Back to a time when I used to take classes. Back to a time when I couldn't really pass shit, it happens. Try to figure out fate, yo, yeah. I try to figure out hate, yo, yeah. On the beach in San Diego, yeah. Feet in the sand, it's late, yo. Moon up in the sky, so high, so bright. The only thing at night that can really shed light. And I wish I didn't fight with my thoughts at night. I think that I'm alright, but it burns inside. And we can just fade away into each other's lives.